right, let me bring in Andy Staples. We always love talking to Andy. Covers college football for On 3 Sports. He was at the national title game. Joins us from Houston. Your takeaway from this game is what?
Michigan was the best team in the country, and they proved it. I mean, that was a dominant performance. 8 yards of carry on the ground, and they won the way they won all season. So this is you can say what you want. I know that there will be people who will go back to the sign stealing stuff, and they'll say, "Oh, they cheated." Look, we've known about all that stuff since before they had to play their toughest games. They showed over this stretch that they were better than everybody else, and you can say what you want. I don't think it's going to diminish the shine on the rings on those guys' fingers.
Okay, but 5 years from now,
by
then the NCAA is going to get around to maybe ruling on this?
Maybe.
Maybe.
And the Kansas case took longer than that, the Kansas basketball one. So we that's a big maybe.
Well, USC as well took a long time.
Yep.
That was 6 years for that. But is there anything that is going to come out, you think, 5 years from now that may taint this national championship or take this championship away when the NCAA finally gets around to a ruling?
I don't know that it's going to be any more than what we already know. That Connor Stallions had people going to games and filming the sideline, which, people outside college football who, if you don't know that rule that people can't go scout games in person, don't even understand why it's a rule. It's a cost-cutting rule that got put in place in the 90s. So it's one of those things that if you have to spend 5 minutes explaining why anybody should even care, I don't think anybody's going to care.
Something that Michigan does that I wonder if other teams are going to do this is they huddle up. So therefore there's no signal. So, the school that is stealing signs or did steal signs, you can't steal their signs because they huddle up. And Nick Saban talked about that it's a whole different look for the defense when, you can kind of see what's going to happen. There's less adjustments. Now they huddle up. Nobody's signaling in anything. And I wonder if more teams are going to do it.
Well, I think more teams are going to go to an electronic method of signaling in plays. That's been against the rules too, but during the bowl season, not the playoff, teams were allowed to do it if both teams wanted to do it. So there were games where you saw some of them were using a thing where the coach was tapping it in on an iPad, and then the players, it would pop up on something they had on their bodies. So it's probably going to go to what the NFL does. Maybe not exactly the way the NFL does it, but that's probably how they do the signaling, and it's not even going to matter.
What happens next with Jim Harbaugh?
Boy, we talked to Ward Manuel, the AD at Michigan last night, and it sounds like he's prepared for an onslaught of NFL interest in Jim Harbaugh. And the way he put it is why wouldn't you be interested if you're an NFL team? The guy coached the NFL 4 years. He went to the NFC Championship game 3 times. He went to the Super Bowl once. So it makes perfect sense with all these openings. It does seem like that's an itch that Harbaugh wants to scratch. He interviewed with the Vikings 2 years ago, talked to the Broncos last year. So it makes sense. I asked Harbaugh about it last night. He's like, "Nah, I just want to enjoy this." But I do think that's coming.
You did ask him about if he wants to entertain the NFL?
Well, so he said he's allowed to sit at the big person's table at the family dinners now because Jack Harbaugh had an FCS championship, a national championship. John Harbaugh has a Super Bowl, and now he's got a national title. So he can sit at the big person's table. I said, "Would you like to add a Super Bowl to that list?" And he said, "I just want to enjoy this," which is a perfectly fair answer.
Yeah, it just feels like, and I thought win or lose, he was going to go back to the NFL. Just feels like, maybe, and now he's even more attractive to, some of these owners who are going, I want somebody to come in and establish a culture. And Jim Harbaugh brings a culture with him. He has a style. We saw that, and it's a style that's very similar to what his brother has with the Ravens. And I'm sure Jim is going to want to try to replicate that again and maybe meet his brother, in an AFC title game or a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and maybe the lights don't go out this time, and maybe they don't. They finished 7 yards short of the goal line. They turned it over on down 7 yards short of the goal line in a 5-point game. That's how close he was. So, can you imagine being that close? Of course, you'd want to go back and do that. And by the way, the Ravens are the number 1 seed in the AFC. So, if you like what John Harbaugh is doing, and you just watch what Jim Harbaugh did, and what he did with this team was pretty spectacular in terms of team building and how they came together. the sign stealing stuff did nothing but make them come together because everybody was talking about them. Everybody was calling them cheaters, and they really rallied around each other. This was a group that, they were built to dominate like this, but it took that little extra where they came together, I think, just helped them more.
It feels like college football is similar to NASCAR, that you're cheating. You're not cheating until you get caught. You're always trying for an edge. I mean, is that fair to have that big a blanket to throw on the sport?
Yes, I think that's fair, and it's been a fair assessment of the sport for over 100 years. So they did get caught, though, and there's a kind of a code among the people in college football, like, don't be dumb enough to get caught, and they were.
All right, Michael Penix draft stock affected at all from last night's performance?
I think it might be a little bit, but more than that, the medicals are going to be what some teams are going to look at, because he had 3 season-ending injuries in Indiana. And so I think they've got to figure out, okay, do we feel like he can stay healthy? Because if he can, he still can throw better than almost any quarterback in this draft. He and Caleb Williams are probably in a class by themselves in terms of just downfield accuracy. But last night, he was pressing a little bit. I talked to Brock Heward last week, the former Washington quarterback, and he said when he's pressing, he tends to miss high. And that's kind of what he did last night. 5 yards an attempt, 255 yards in over 50 attempts is not an efficient night. And you saw there were times when he had people open. He had Roma Dunze open on that play that would have probably changed the game and overshot him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it will affect it probably a little bit because this is the best defense he's played. But I believe he's going to the Senior Bowl. They're going to see him up close. And when they see that ball come out of his hand, they're standing right there 2 feet away. They're going to go, yeah, there's not many other guys doing that.
We're talking to Andy Staples, covers college football for On3 Sports. I'm not a college football insider, but I think we got to move the transfer portal after the bowl games. Can we do that? Can we have a better window here that's a little bit more fair to the bowl games? You're going to have more playoff games coming up next year. So, these kids can maybe play in those bowl games because they're meaningful and then go into the transfer portal?
It will take the coaches acting like adults if they can handle it. It can be done. The reason the transfer portal window is where it is because schools go by semesters. So that's when the semester break is. So if you're going to enroll at your new school, you're going to enroll before the spring semester starts. So it can be done, though. I'll give you an example. Last night, if Michael Penix had to come out, the guy who would have come in is Dylan Morris. Dylan Morris is going to be James Madison's quarterback next year, but he was still playing for Washington. So it was okay. The world didn't end because he suited up for Washington last night. And there were other coaches who allowed their players to do this. Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri said, hey, look, you can go on visits. You can decide where your new school is going to be, and you can come play for us in the Cotton Bowl, just as long as it's not a distraction. So it definitely can be done, but the coaches have to be the grown-ups about it.
We say goodbye to the Pac-12, the artist formerly known as the Pac-12.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed. I grew up watching these games, these rivalries, and now we have Oregon State and Washington State.
The 2-pack. Yeah. At least they got to keep all the money, or at least most of the money. It's very sad. It's just strange to see. But that game last night we saw was a Big Ten game. Those two teams will be in the Big Ten. And, I'm glad the Oregon-Washington rivalry gets ported to a new conference and USC, UCLA. But, that was you identified that with the West Coast. It was West Coast football. You had Pac-12 after dark. It was its own culture. And the fact that the conference was so badly mismanaged, from Larry Scott, the previous commissioner, to George Kliavkoff, the one who's there now, they just never quite understood the business of college football or why people care and how to make people care. And they had a pretty good product. I don't think they understood where it fit into the landscape.
Great to talk to you. Thanks for your contributions all season long, and thank you again.
Thank you, Dan.
Andy Staples covers college football for On3 Sports, and I was there for the national title game.